Welcome to Your True Calling. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Dr. Michelle Chappell, a psychologist and a rock star. I've helped thousands of people find their true purpose by discovering their one-of-a-kind superpowers. Each week, I'll share tools and client success stories to help you find gifts you don't know you have so that you can thrive in a career that fills your soul and passion projects that make you feel whole. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be speaking to Eileen Burns-Zaire today. She's a life and leadership coach, psychologist, and educator. She just came out with a new book called You're Not Too Old and It's Not Too Late. We're going to be talking about how to savor positive moments, make micro connections, and be resilient. We're also going to talk about how sometimes what you want to do with your life is right in front of you. You just don't see it yet. Let's get into it. Hi, Eileen. I'm so glad you're on my podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Michelle, for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You are a successful woman, and I just want to take a moment to tell listeners a little bit about who you are before we get started. So, you are a life and leadership coach. You're certified through the International Coaching Federation. You are a PsyD and psychology psychologist, and you're also an educator. Congratulations on all that. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
And you also write a blog for Psychology Today called Flourish and Thrive. And you are the author of a relatively new book. It just came out last year, titled You're Not Too Old and It's Not Too Late. And I cannot wait to dig into that. Thank you for being here and congratulations on your book.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it was just released in January, actually, but it does have a 2025 copyright.
So before we get into it, let me just tell new listeners what this podcast is about. So I'm also a coach, but I'm a life and career coach. So we're similar and different. And I'm also a psychologist, but I am a cognitive psychologist. So the clients I work with are usually trying to find something that's missing in their life. So I help them discover a gift or a talent that they don't know they have, or they may know that they have it, but they don't feel confident enough in using it in the world. I've found that often when people find their hidden superpowers, they also discover their purpose. And so the purpose of this podcast is really the same thing, to help people understand what some of their hidden gifts might be and to give them more life direction.
Fascinating, right? So important for people to discover those aspects of themselves that they maybe weren't aware of before or weren't producing with before.
Exactly. And I thought you would be a perfect guest for this podcast because the theme this year is transformation. And you inspire people to flourish in life and work through people's strengths, purpose, and potential. And you also have, I think, an interesting life story too, which is what I wanted to start with. So I thought we'd dig into your story a little bit and then we talk about your book. Does that sound okay with you?
Wonderful.
Okay. The reason why I like to do this is because a lot of listeners are on the younger side, and I think it really helps for them to hear how people, go on their journeys and sort of navigate towards where they are now in life, and that's not usually a straight line. And yours wasn't. You have a BA in education, and you were in pharmaceutical sales for a while. And so you don't have to, tell your whole life story, but just sort of, why did you end that career and how did you decide to do what you're doing now?
It surely has been a meandering road, and I really think it's only in retrospect, along the path that I've been able to look back and sort of make sense of some of what happened, because a lot of times things would happen and they weren't necessarily my choice, what the situation was. But then, I had to make choices with my family about, sometimes how to get back up and keep going, right? Or move forward, or where to take the shifts, because in some way what I was doing didn't meet either what I needed to be doing or what worked for my family or what fit in the world.
Right.
Actually, I forgot what your original question was. So,
Why did you stop being in pharmaceutical sales? Why the change in direction?
yeah, so pharmaceutical sales was for me sort of a fallback career right off the bat because teaching, in a public school at that time just wasn't accessible to me.
Mm.
And I had worked actually in a pharmacy in sort of a pharmacy tech role to put myself through college and high school. And I had that background and then a science major. And that was just a really good fit for me. And part of why it was a good fit for me is because what I loved to do was not the sales part. It was about the science and the talking to the doctors and going into the hospitals and the learning part of it, which made me good at it in those days. But it didn't in some way really fulfill me in what I thought I wanted to be doing. And so there just came a point that I decided that I really needed to move on for that because there was something more for me in terms of what I wanted and needed to be doing in order to feel more fulfilled.
Hmm. So what drew you to psychology?
So psychology really, I think was a natural fit for me because for as long back as I can remember, I was always trying to figure stuff out. I was always trying to understand people, and um, I used to think of my life. I recall there was a point in my life in high school when I was taking a walk along the beach at Lake Michigan with a friend, and I remember saying to her that I think of my life as the search.
Mm.
And at that time, it was really about the search that there's something that I was looking for. There was something that would be, meaningful and important that sort of was meant for me. Um, and I wanted to find that.
Mhm.
And I wanted to understand the way the world worked. And I thought that if I could do that, I would feel better and I could make more contributions in the world. And so I just really uh, as I learned about psychology, partly through my work as a pharmaceutical rep, because I called on a lot of psychiatrists,
Ah.
right? It's like, this is the stuff that's really interesting to me. And then one day, as a young mother, I sort of looked at my bookshelf and I thought, boy, I got a lot of psychology books here. I wonder how many I have. And I started bringing them from all over the house, and there were shelves of them. And then I thought, well, wow, I must really like this. What is this telling me?
Yeah.
And then, with the support of my husband, I decided I had to go back to school. I already had a master's degree. I had to go back to school and start with, at junior college, community college with bachelor's level courses just to get the prerequisites even to be able to start.
Wow.
So it was a very big learning journey for me, really. I don't mean academic learning, but also sort of internal learning
Uh,
about myself, what I wanted, and also sort of what I could do if I really put my mind to it.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I can resonate with that, of course, because we're sort of similar.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment, though, that you made, you know? That's because you had to go back and take all these classes to be able. So I think I'm just sort of saying to listeners, sometimes when you shift gears, I think if it feels right, though, the commitment is okay, right? I mean, you're willing to do that. Actually, can you speak on that just a little bit?
I completely agree with you, Michelle. Like when I look back on that time now, and it was really a period of, oh, I don't know, the whole path was probably, 8 years or so from starting to finishing, maybe longer. I don't know how I did it. And then I think to myself, well, you know why I did it? Because it was that important to me that there was some things about it that I really needed to do in order to accomplish what I now would say was what was really meaningful and sort of a calling in my life. And a lot of that was about the learning journey. I'm not sure that I knew exactly what I was going to do with it.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate to have the great support of my husband and my family so that I was able to do what needed to be done and also to be able to do it in a way that's where my children were still supported.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, the next question I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it, Do you feel like you found your calling? Do you?
The actual process actually of going to school and all that it entailed and all the learning and growth again was very much made me a part of who I am today.
Mhm.
What I thought I was going to do with the degree is ended up being sort of different than what I might have thought I would do when I graduated.
Ah,
Um, but that's, as I look at that, you know, the learning and the skills and the strengths that I had and have, the strengths that were developed and continue to develop, um, and what is meaningful to me, those are transferable in all kinds of ways in life throughout the seasons of life, and that's a lot, some of what I write about in my book, You're Not Too Old and It's Not Too Late. It's really about you know, the constant process of self-discovery and asking ourselves the big questions and the small questions and picking ourselves up when we fall down with with resilience,
yeah.
etc. That helps us to really, continue to grow and develop in life, in the face of whatever life's challenges are.
Okay, dear listener, I just wanted to take a moment to check in with you. I'm really enjoying hearing about Eileen's story. And one thing that stood out to me is how she figured out that she wanted to become a psychologist, because I thought that this could easily apply to you as well. And it certainly happened to me. One day, she just happens to notice that there's a lot of psychology books in her house. Oh, maybe I'm interested in psychology. This happens more often than you would think. It happened to me, but sort of in the reverse order. After I got my doctorate from Princeton, I interviewed at some colleges for a job as a professor. And I remember there was one job interview in particular that I did at New College, which is where I did get my first job. After I finished the 3 days I was there, I did interviews, I did a talk, I met with students, I did individual talks along the beach with several of the professors. It was very interesting, and I actually loved it there. And then it was time for me to go back to the small airport and eventually fly back to Princeton because I was still there. And when I was waiting in the airport, the first thing I did was to go to one of those little stores, and I bought every entertainment magazine I could find. And I was reading articles about singer-songwriters and rock bands, and I was just so fascinated with music and artists and new albums and what the top 10 hits were, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. As soon as I stopped interviewing for my job in psychology, I found that my total attention turned towards the entertainment industry. And that was one of the first clues that I got that eventually I would go towards music as a career, that I would actually leave academics and become a full-time rock and roll singer. So I'm just saying, think about it for a minute. That might be a little bit of an extreme story for you, but that's how outlandish it may seem to you. So just take a moment and think about something like, what's really getting your interest right now that you may not be aware of? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What gets your attention? What do you think about? Like, I was thinking about entertainment. Eileen was reading books on psychology. This was before she became a psychologist and before I became a rock star. What's getting your attention? I think it's a good question to ask yourself. Okay, next we're going to dive into some really wonderful advice that Eileen shares in her book. Let's go.
Well, let's talk about your book. So the full title of your book is You're Not Too Old and It's Not Too Late. Weekly practices of meaning, mindfulness, and new possibilities at midlife and beyond. So you write about invigorating the second half of life with greater resilience. flourishing and possibilities. How do you define the second half of life? Who is the book for?
Mm, that's a good question. You know, I really think, when I spoke to my daughters and others, even in their late 30s and 40s, some of them said to me, hey, I'm really kind of getting near the second half of life, in that kind of a way. So in my sense, to my thinking, and from conversations I have with people, I'm going to say anywhere really from late 30s forward, you
Yeah.
know. And that's not up really for me to decide either, to define, because it really depends on when each individual gets to a space in their life where they're starting to think about, um, that maybe they're in the middle of their life, that or they're really thinking about what's really ahead for them, and how are they going to navigate the different seasons of their lives.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think too, you might be surprised, but I think some younger people might be interested because I think a lot of people, clients I talk to are really they say life is short and they're wondering about their future with all of, climate change and all of these things and what the different phases might be. So I think maybe even younger might be interested. Well, so why did you write the book? Who inspired you or what inspired you?
So this is really a book that I have been thinking about for such a long time, and I'm really so excited to share it with people. And started to allude to, Michelle, navigating our lives, young adulthood, middle adulthood, older adulthood, right, in the 21st century is really not the same as it was in our parents' generations. There are so many changes. There are so many new understandings, in life that are really inviting us to reimagine and to really think about how we live our day to day, how we respond to what's happening around us, and how we want to be present on a day-to-day basis, and in the larger scheme of our lives.
Yeah, yeah.
I really wanted to help people also sort of revise their visions, our visions of aging, because and when I'm using aging, I'm just going to say getting older, because there's a lot of tired terms that are used. When someone turns 40, we say they're over the hill. I don't say it, but others do, right? And there are other ways to be thinking about getting older that are probably much more vibrant, right? Living with a healthy lifestyle. And wisdomhood is a term that I like. And so I really think that it's really important to pay attention to the signals that society is giving us, to notice how we're responding to them, and then to, have some conversations with ourselves and with others about, well, how do I think about, these seasons of my life, and how do I want to, right? And what might be best for me?
Yeah, and we don't have to be by how other people define us. We can find our own path.
No, and I say that is part of the process of, maturation and generativity, is thinking about the messages that we're getting, and then pausing and thinking about, well, what do I think about that? What's meaningful for me? What matters to me, and how I want to be present in the world, you know? And then what are the practices uh, that I can engage in, and want to engage in, that can help me be a good person in the world, or the kind of person, I feel is important to be in the world, and also be true to myself and what matters.
Yeah, okay, you and I are as one on that mission. I love that. I love that. Oh, yes. So let's talk about resilience. How do you define it, and how can we become more resilient?
Yeah, and that's a big question, and it's a word that's used so much these days.
Yeah.
When I started thinking about it, and learning about it more, and 25 years ago or whatever, it was a newer term. So, um, resilience is the capacity, not just to respond to adverse situations, but also to, how do we pick ourselves up and move forward we're not, resilience used to be defined more as bouncing back. And now I think, a lot of, experts say, well, when something happens, when there's a challenge or a situation, we may not bounce back to where we were. The question really is, how do we pick ourselves back up and how do we move forward from this point?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such, and if we're here, we've got resilience. Everybody has resilience and doesn't really recognize it. So then the question becomes, how can I recognize it and how can I strengthen my resilience skills, my resilience toolbox, so that perhaps as things happen, I am more ready, more able. And when I fall down, how can I maybe get up a little bit faster, right? And be able to move forward maybe a little bit more effectively.
Yeah. Can you give an example of a tool in the toolbox that can help you with that?
Right. So there's a lot of, there are so many of them really. So one of them is savoring positive experiences, right? So even in the face of difficult situations, right? This is not about ignoring negative or difficult emotions or anything, but even in difficult situations, where can we notice or savor the positive moments,
Mm.
right? I remember when a family member passed away and people were coming to visit me and it was a sad time, but the moments when different people walked through the door and we had, a moment of connection, moments of relationships are a big factor in resilience. Calling on our resources, again, savoring positive experience or good moments, like moments of joy or beauty. The sun is shining today, right? Of someone who's ill. Well, I woke up this morning and it's a little bit easier to do such and such this morning, right? Or just noticing those moments. Gratitude is another skill, right? Just noticing goodness even in everyday life. It doesn't have to be big stuff, right? Being thankful that the sun is shining. Being thankful for the taste of this delicious piece of chocolate or this morsel of food, right? Being thankful or noticing a positive moment with someone. Relationships and building relationships is a really important tool for resilience. And it doesn't mean that the relationship has to be like the big, important relationship in life. Even small mindful moments of connection can make a really big difference. The work of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson has spoken about micro moments of connection with the person in the grocery store even, though that's another tool for resilience, and having even one, I'm going to go back to connections again, because having even one supportive connection, in life can really be another resilience tool.
Oh, those are all great examples. And I like the last one, especially because we're in a loneliness epidemic right now. A lot of people may only have one connection. So it's good to know that will really make a difference. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. You talked about strategies that people can use. Do you want to share a couple that people can use as they navigate through the world?
Sure, sure. And you're not too old, and it's not too late to has shares lots of those, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
And stop me when it's enough, right?
Oh, sure.
Living with
I'm really enjoying listening to this, so I don't think I'll be stopping you anytime soon.
I appreciate that. Living with more mindful presence, right? The word mindfulness is thrown around a lot, and sometimes people think that's just woo-woo stuff, and you have to sit on the ground with your legs folded for an hour. That's not what I'm talking about here, although that can be great for some of us. But this is just being mindful during the day, pausing even for a moment to gently pay attention to this moment. And for example, I paused and took a few breaths and, sort of calmed myself in a mindful way before this podcast today, right? That's mindfulness. It's just gently paying attention to the moments of our lives
Yeah.
and much more,
Yeah.
right? Um, Compassion and kindness. Such an important tool in the toolbox. And it starts with self-compassion for ourselves, right? Showing ourselves the same kindness that we might show someone else. I'm not here saying that that's always easy, but it is a great tool in the toolbox. And the work of Dr. Kristen Neff speaks greatly to the, the value and importance of compassion and self-compassion. One that I think you deal with a lot, Michelle, which is knowing our strengths,
Mhm.
right, and leveraging them. Right? And I am very aware of the, uh, the 24 character strengths that have been identified. Uh, um, and when we know what our top strengths are, we can leverage those in life,
Mhm.
right? For example, teamwork, honesty, perspective, love, leadership, etc. And when we have lower strengths that do not come as easily to us, sometimes we can engage a higher strength, one of our top strengths, to help us sort of lift up, our lower strengths.
Yeah, yeah.
So knowing our strengths can be thought of really as a superpower, meaning, finding, seeking meaning. Even on a day-to-day basis, what really matters, right? What really matters to me now? And that may change. It doesn't have to be the definitive, meaning of life kind of thing, but engaging in things that give us a sense of meaning and purpose is just critical to resilience. And and all of these might manifest differently in different seasons of our lives. Right? They're certainly at midlife and beyond, but also in young adulthood, also for teenagers, also in children.
Oh, yes. Well, I know about some research about Gen Z and millennials that shows that finding more life direction reduces depression and anxiety. So a lot of them have mental health concerns, but sometimes those concerns are met by finding life direction. And a lot of them don't like their jobs right now, and that's
Hmm.
also a source of upset. So I think it really the purpose. I think that works for all generations. It's important for everybody. You know,
Absolutely.
I think without it, it's easy for life, just like a wave, to clap you down. But if you've got an inner drive that's telling you where you want to go and what makes you come alive, then you're going to be able to handle that better. Yeah.
I agree. And just, to add another aspect of that, I know when I coach with people, sometimes people are not so happy in their jobs. And so, you might be looking for a new job. And at the same time, right, if the job is not satisfying, what's another aspect of life in which you can find something that's meaningful?
Yeah.
So, other things that you can do, because some we're not all lucky enough, or able to find the job that is the meaningful job, especially earlier in life. And so there are other ways at the same time to find meaning. For example, maybe doing some volunteer work, or engaging in a hobby, or finding one aspect of the job. I mean, I've worked with people that uh, they're not so happy in the day-to-day of their job, but there are ways that they engage, for example, in relationships with people at work. And I mean in terms of um, maybe supporting someone, as a leader, for example, and helping them develop their leadership skills, mentoring, for example, which they may find meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I also write about that in my book, but from a different angle. But we're complex people. There's a lot of facets to who we are, and we don't have to find our purpose necessarily in our work, because only one third of us apparently do. So if you
Hmm.
can find it in a passion project on the side, or helping a cause or something like that, that can bring. There's research that shows that it brings resilience too, so that you can go back to your work day with more energy and focus, and desire to help your teammates, that sort of thing. So it kind of circles back like that. Yeah. So you talk about reflecting on our stories as we navigate our lives. Can you say more about that?
You know, I there's many ways to think about it. What comes to mind right now is the idea of making meaning. So, you know, looking back, I know for me part of that story was starting to pull up what have been some of the common threads in my life, even when I did some things that felt disjointed. And so I learned that some of the a common thread was teaching, that in almost everything that I have done, there has been an aspect of teaching in different ways, but that there's an aspect, relationships, and in some way trying to help others become, in some way, improve the quality of their lives, right? In some way. And for me, it's never about telling people what to do ever. It's about, more about inspiring people, or helping people to empower themselves, right? Which is sort of what I feel like this book does, right? That there's lots of ideas offered in the book, and the idea that, well, then what inspires you, and what might you choose in terms of ideas here to help you empower yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in that. And I'm going to put links, by the way, to your website, your blog for Psychology Today, and your book in the show notes so that people can find them easily, because I think a lot of people will be interested. What are one or two main ideas you hope your readers will take away from your book?
Um, I think first of all and foremost that as I mentioned before, navigating midlife and beyond is really different than it used to be. And again, there are lots of ways we can reimagine getting older that are different. And then ultimately, our lives really involve a series of choices, whether intentional or unintentional, right? And our beliefs, our expectations are sort of a product of our choices. And so there are many options and discernment points in our lives, whether we realize them or not. So, the idea of pausing at times, maybe taking a mindful moment, recognizing that there are a number, typically there are a number of options, right? Sometimes the options might simply be, how am I going to respond to this, difficult situation or this wonderful situation? But that attitude is part of part of the choice we might make, right? Um, so I think, and I think to really open up to the idea that new possibilities can happen all the way through our lives. They may be narrower and smaller. They may not be the ones that we started out for, right? But what are the possibilities here and now? Right? And to really be able to think about that, and to really be able to be generative about that. I like to think about the practice in Japan called kintsugi, where a bowl is cracked, right? And Japanese culture's reverence for elders invites them to paint the cracks and the broken pieces with gold, right? So as we face the challenges of life, and we all do, right? How can we paint those with gold? How can we notice where the light is getting in, right? Even at the dark places. And then how can we move forward from that?
Dear listeners, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thank you, Eileen, for sharing your wisdom with us today. Thank you for listening to Your True Calling. Please leave a review and share it with your friends. From my website, yourtruecalling.org, you can follow me on social media, learn more about my music and my coaching, contact me to find your superpowers live on the air,
and help me produce future episodes by funding me on Patreon.